It started with a challenge. Prove the lake isn't haunted. Emma Vale, 33, environmental analyst and skeptic to her core, accepted it with a smirk. On a gray morning by Crescent Lake, mist hung like smoke over still water. The town's fishermen had stopped coming weeks ago, claiming the water whispered their names. But Emma's team came armed with drones, sensors, and logic. She wanted data, not folklore. Yet, when the first drone dipped low over the water's skin, its feed trembled. Beneath the ripples, a shape emerged, symmetrical, shifting, deliberate. Darren Holt, 47. Her stoic supervisor told her to zoom in. Marcy Tran, 24, the intern clutching her tablet, gasped as the lake reflected a grid of pale faces below the surface, arranged like a submerged crowd. Emma leaned closer to the monitor, whispering, "That's not reflection. That's movement." Then the feed cut to black, and the drone, hovering midair, began to descend on its own. The office was supposed to feel safe, but the walls hummed with leftover tension. Emma replayed the footage frame by frame, watching the glitch twist into patterns like eyes opening underwater. Darren leaned against the doorway, silent, pretending he wasn't unsettled. Marcy sat beside Emma, headphones clamped on, whispering timestamps. Then, between frames, a burst of corrupted audio formed words. "Not reflection." Emma froze. Marcy looked up, wide-eyed. Darren stepped forward, but the sound was gone. Just static, low and uneven, like breathing. Emma hit pause, her pulse drumming. Logic couldn't explain what she saw. She told herself it was digital noise, but when she zoomed in, one face beneath the water looked back and blinked. Emma told herself she wouldn't go back to the lake, but obsession always wins. That night, she sat in her car, near the shore. Fog pressing against the windshield. The water was darker now, almost black, like it absorbed daylight. Her radio crackled with bursts of static, echoing the drone's dying sound. She whispered, "Show me what I missed." The mist parted briefly and a faint shimmer glowed beneath the surface, outlining what looked like a staircase leading downward. The lake seemed to breathe. Emma reached for her camera. A shape moved under the water, and the car lights flickered out. The next morning, Darren found Emma at her desk, eyes bloodshot, mumbling coordinates. Marcy hovered nearby, holding a mug of untouched coffee. "It's not just reflection," Emma whispered. "There's something built down there." Darren's expression cracked for a moment. Raw fear replaced control. "That project was before your time," he muttered. "Don't dig into it." But Emma already had. Her drones' recovered footage showed foundations, buildings, a town beneath the water. A town with lights that still flickered. By noon, word spread through town that the agency had seen something. Officer Blake Rowan arrived uninvited, boots muddy, eyes hollow. "You people never learn," he said, voice low. That lake was meant to stay sealed. Emma met his gaze unflinching. "What's under there?" she asked. He didn't answer. He only turned to the window where rain began to fall, whispering against the glass like fingers tapping to be let in. The power flickered. The lights dimmed. The monitors blinked once, then displayed a live feed, though no one had launched a drone. The hum of computers filled the lab, steady but wrong, like something alive beneath the static. Emma Vale hadn't slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the faces under the water. Marcy Tran sat cross-legged beside her, scrubbing through the corrupted drone footage frame by frame. Darren Holt watched from the hallway, eyes sunken, pretending he wasn't afraid. Then the audio file pulsed, soft at first like someone exhaling. Emma boosted the gain, expecting interference, but the waveform twisted and formed words. Emma! Her name? The voice was wet, distant, pleading. Marcy jerked off her headphones, trembling. Darren stepped closer, whispering, "Turn it off." But Emma couldn't. She stared at the screen, frozen as the playback shifted from drone footage to a live view of the lake, filmed from beneath the surface. Hours blurred into each other. Emma stopped checking the clock. The footage no longer behaved. Files duplicated themselves. Timestamps shifted backward. Marcy tried to delete them, but they reappeared. In one frame, Emma's own reflection stared back from underwater, mouth open as if screaming. "That's not me," she whispered. Darren said nothing. He sat in the corner, face hidden in his hands, muttering to himself. A low mechanical hum filled the air, vibrating through the floor. The speakers began to play faint, overlapping voices, hundreds of them, all whispering at once. The sound built until the glass on the monitors trembled. Then silence. The cursor blinked, waiting, as if the lake itself was listening. Marcy tried to lighten the mood. "Maybe it's a data ghost," she said, forcing a smile. Emma didn't answer. She was staring at the footage again. This time, the reflection behind her, a man's shape, standing where no one was. The reflection moved when she didn't. Slowly, she turned, her pulse hammering. The space behind her was empty. The screen flickered and the reflection lifted a hand, pressing its palm against the inside of the monitor. Emma gasped and stumbled back. The screen cracked, spider webbing outward. A single drop of water leaked from the fracture, sliding down her cheek like a tear. By midnight, the agency felt more like a morgue. Every monitor hummed faintly, even the ones unplugged. Darren had vanished into the basement to check the servers, but he hadn't come back. Emma followed the sound of dripping water down the corridor. It led her to the archive room, where she found puddles forming beneath the file cabinets. Each drawer's label bore a year, but some had been replaced, overwritten in Darren's handwriting. One folder lay open, Crescent Resettlement Project, 1983. Inside were photos of a town before it was flooded, faces she recognized, including one that looked exactly like hers. When Darren returned, he looked older, as if the basement had stolen years from him. His voice was distant. "You shouldn't have opened those files," he said softly. "The lake remembers everything that was buried." Emma demanded answers, but his gaze went to the window, where rain pressed harder against the glass. "It's not haunting us," he whispered. "It's calling us back." Marcy's monitor suddenly flashed white, filling the room with a sound like distant thunder, and a shape rising slowly from the depths on the live feed. Something vast, something aware. Emma Vale didn't go home. By morning, she sat surrounded by open folders, the scent of damp paper and metal thick in the air. She pieced together the truth one file at a time. Crescent Lake wasn't natural. It was built over a town evacuated in 1983. Only the town was never evacuated. The resettlement reports were forged. She found Darren Holt's signature at the bottom of every approval. When he walked in, she didn't hide the papers. "How many people, Darren?" she asked. He didn't answer, just looked out the window toward the fog-wrapped lake. "Enough to drown the noise," he murmured, "but not enough to forget it." Marcy Tran entered quietly, clutching a printout. "There's more," she whispered. The page showed sonar data from the last drone. It mapped shapes that shouldn't exist, buildings with intact power sources humming beneath the water. "Electric current," Marcy said, voice trembling. "Something's still running down there." Emma's pulse quickened. Darren's face turned gray. "Those systems were decommissioned 40 years ago," he said, too quickly. The silence that followed was heavy, like pressure under deep water. Then the lights in the office flickered. Once, twice, and all three monitors turned on by themselves, showing live feeds from beneath the lake. Officer Blake Rowan arrived again that evening, summoned by silence rather than phone. His boots echoed through the hall before he even spoke. "You opened it," he said. His weathered face, half hidden under a soaked hat, told more than his words. Emma confronted him, demanding the truth. He sighed, eyes lowering. They didn't drown by accident, he said quietly. They were told the relocation was temporary. Then the dam gates closed. Darren turned away, guilt raw in every line of his body. Emma's stomach twisted. The ghosts weren't haunting the lake. They were trapped inside it. Emma demanded proof. Blake hesitated, then handed her an old cassette tape, its label smeared. Evacuation orders, Crescent. Darren's hands shook as he took it. You kept this, he whispered. Someone had to, Blake replied. Emma found an old recorder, pressed play. A man's voice crackled through static. Residents will be relocated for safety. Water release begins at 800 hours. Then, faint in the background, screams. The recording cut off with a splash. Emma stared at Darren. You signed off on this, she said. He nodded slowly, tears glinting under fluorescent light. We thought it would be cleaner that way. The truth broke them. Darren confessed what the files couldn't. The agency was paid to flood the town faster, concealing chemical dumping. The water would bury everything. But it didn't. The sensors show power readings because the lake never died, he whispered. The water preserves everything. Emma's hands shook as she whispered. You mean everyone? The monitors behind her came alive one by one, showing underwater streets, doors, and windows glowing faintly. Then movement, slow and human. Marcy screamed as figures began to walk through the submerged town, faces tilted upward, staring at the cameras. The next morning, the air outside the agency was colder, sharper, like the lake was breathing again. Emma Vale stood by the shoreline, another drone in hand. We need new readings, she said, though her voice trembled. Marcy Tran hesitated beside her, eyes darting toward the water that now rippled on its own. Darren Holt stayed in the car, silent, guilt etched into every motion. The drone lifted smoothly, slicing through the fog. But halfway across the water, its signal flickered, then duplicated. Two identical feeds appeared on the monitor, one from above, one from beneath. Emma leaned forward, whispering, How can there be a second camera? The reflection below the water moved independently, and it smiled. The feed fractured. One camera drifted deeper, tilting slowly downward, showing the drowned streets. Streetlights glowed beneath the waves, bending like underwater candles. Emma zoomed in on a flicker of motion near an old signpost. The letters were barely visible. Town Hall. Marcy's voice shook. Someone's moving down there. The figure looked up, a man in a tattered jacket, eyes blank, hair waving in the current. His mouth moved, forming silent words. Darren whispered from behind, That's the mayor. He shouldn't be. But the feed cut, replaced by static that sounded disturbingly like a heartbeat. The drone's signal returned, but it was no longer responding to commands. It moved as if following something unseen. Manual overrides. Dead, Marcy said, typing furiously. The feed showed the drone descending into a tunnel-like structure, its lights glancing off metal walls. Emma whispered. There were no tunnels in the plans. Darren's hands shook. There weren't supposed to be. Static surged, then cleared, revealing dozens of pale figures lining the walls, motionless, facing the camera. As the drone hovered, all their heads turned at once. They lost the drone feed at 3:17 p.m. Emma's stomach knotted as the signal died. It's gone, Marcy whispered. Darren sank into a chair, face buried in his hands. We shouldn't have come back. But Emma wasn't ready to quit. We need another drone, she said. Marcy refused, shaking her head. I'm done. It's not data anymore. It's alive. She walked toward the door, raincoat half-zipped, eyes wet. If we stay, it'll take us too. The power flickered as she left. Darren looked up at Emma, voice low. "She's right." Emma stared at the dead monitor, whispering, "Then why can't I stop watching?" Marcy never made it home. Her phone pinged one last signal from the middle of the lake. When Emma and Darren replayed the office surveillance, they saw her pause by the window before leaving. The reflection in the glass wasn't hers. It smiled. Then, her figure stepped backward into the darkness and vanished. The next morning, the sheriff found her raincoat floating near the shore. Emma sat in silence, staring at the footage, lips trembling. "She didn't fall in," she whispered. "Something reached out." Darren said nothing. The power flickered again, and from the speaker came a faint sound. Marcy's voice whispering from the depths. "Emma, come see." Silence filled the office like a living thing. Emma Vale sat at her desk, the glow from her monitor painting her face in cold light. On the screen, Marcy Tran's final footage, the faint shimmer of movement under black water. Darren Holt stood behind her, jaw tight. "You knew this could happen," Emma said quietly. "You knew it was alive." Darren's voice broke. "It's not alive. Not like us. It remembers. It reacts." He pulled a folder from his coat. Photos of early tests. They found tissue, not decay. "The lake feeds off memory." Emma stared at him, horror dawning. "You turned it into a grave that thinks." Emma stormed out, rain pounding the ground as she headed back toward the lake. She had to see it herself. Darren followed, shouting for her to stop, but she didn't listen. The water churned, despite the calm air. She set up the control rig again, soaked to the skin, trembling. "You're not real," she said, her voice cracking. "You're just residue." But as she launched the final drone, the feed stabilized instantly, and a voice whispered through the headset, not distorted this time. "Emma Vale." The water below rippled in perfect sync with her breath. The drone dove deeper than any before. Its feed glowed in real time, light cutting through miles of darkness. Then the landscape appeared. Streets of the old town, preserved perfectly. Homes still standing. Street lamps burned faintly, untouched by time. And then came the movement. Dozens, maybe hundreds, of figures, suspended mid-motion, eyes open, hair floating like seagrass. They weren't dead. Their chests rose and fell. Their lips moved in silent rhythm, breathing water. Darren's voice cracked through the radio. "Turn it off, Emma." But she couldn't. She whispered, "They're still alive." Darren broke. "They said the flooding would be clean. They lied. We sealed them in, Emma. Alive." His confession shattered what little calm remained. Emma stared at him, shaking her head. "You built a monument to suffering and called it progress." The water began to rise, rippling outward from the drone's impact zone. The wind carried a sound, not thunder, but 1,000 faint whispers. Darren fell to his knees, clutching his head. Emma looked down at the lake, her reflection splitting into many. A ring of faces looking up, waiting. The ground trembled. From beneath the water, faint lights flared brighter. The entire drowned town awakening. Emma stumbled backward as the voice returned, stronger now, coming from every direction. "Join us." Darren rose, tears and rain indistinguishable. "We made it remember," he said softly. "Now it wants us back." The water surged, rising unnaturally fast. Emma grabbed his arm, screaming his name, but the wave hit, swallowing him whole. She was thrown backward onto the rocks, coughing. The last thing she saw before blacking out was Darren's silhouette under the surface, eyes open, staring upward, as the glow consumed him. When Emma woke, the rain had stopped. The world outside the agency was too still, too clean, as if nothing had ever happened. But inside, the walls dripped condensation, and every surface hummed faintly. The lake's sound had followed her here. She touched the monitor. It flickered on without power, Static bled into shapes, rooms she recognized, people she'd known. Her reflection appeared among them, but it wasn't mirroring her movements. It tilted its head the wrong way, eyes softer, almost pitying. Emma whispered, "What do you want?" The screen rippled as if submerged. A single word formed across the display. "Remember." Emma walked through the corridors, every step echoing in the empty building. She kept hearing snippets of conversation. Marcy laughing, Darren calling her name. All from rooms that no longer existed. The air smelled of rain and copper. She followed the sound into the conference room, where files lay scattered like fallen leaves. Each page contained a photo from her life. Not her work, but her memories. The handwriting on the margins wasn't hers. "It remembers for you," one note read. Her pulse quickened. The room tilted slightly, though she hadn't moved. She closed her eyes and heard water lapping against the walls. Night returned before Emma realized the sun had set. The agency lights flickered in rhythm with her heartbeat. She turned on the recorder, a reflex more than reason, and spoke softly. "If this isn't real, I need proof." But her voice didn't echo back. Another did, softer, kinder. "You wanted truth," it said. The sound filled her with a calm that frightened her more than the fear itself. She played it back. The tape was empty. No sound at all, just silence. She laughed shakily, pressing her palms to her temples. For the first time, she wondered if the haunting had ever been outside her at all. The building felt different the next morning, lighter somehow, as if emptied of its ghosts. Yet, when Emma checked the cameras, the footage still streamed from beneath the lake. The drowned streets glowed faintly, steady and rhythmic, like a heartbeat. She realized something terrible. It wasn't recording anymore. It was mirroring her. When she stood, the street light in the feed flickered. When she reached out, the water rippled. She whispered, "You're in me now, aren't you?" Her reflection in the dark monitor smiled faintly, as if forgiving her. By evening, Emma walked outside for the first time in days. Crescent Lake stretched before her, calm and silver beneath the moon. She stood at the edge, not afraid anymore. The whispers were gone. Only her own breathing filled the air. She understood now. The lake didn't punish. It remembered. It carried everything, even guilt, until someone was ready to face it. She knelt, fingertips brushing the surface. For a heartbeat, she saw the town below, peaceful, unmoving. Then it faded, replaced by her reflection. Whole. Human. Silent. She whispered, "I see you." The water didn't answer, but it didn't need to. Days passed before anyone found Emma Vale again. She was sitting at her desk, motionless, watching the last drone footage on loop. There was nothing unusual in the recording. No figures, no glow, no movement. Just water, calm and endless. Darren Holt's name was all over the investigation reports, but he never resurfaced. The agency was shut down for data contamination. Emma gave one final interview. When asked what she'd seen that morning, she paused, then said, "Sometimes we call things haunted when we can't admit we're the ones who left the damage there." The reporter didn't understand, but she didn't need him to. Emma finally did. Emma visited the lake one last time. The fog had lifted. The water shimmered beneath early morning sun. There were no drones, no cameras, no hum of machines. Only wind and ripples. She sat by the bank and opened her notebook. Inside were her field notes, now rewritten in her own careful hand. Page after page, she'd crossed out numbers and replaced them with questions. Who decides what's forgotten? When does truth become mercy? She closed the book gently and placed it on the rocks. It wasn't evidence anymore. It was confession. Weeks later, the footage Emma recorded was cataloged and stored by the regional archive. The final drone clip, the one she claimed showed nothing, began circulating among interns. Most said it was just empty water, but one technician noticed something strange. Faint vibrations in the audio track, a steady rhythm, like breathing. When asked if they should analyze it further, Emma's replacement smiled faintly and said, "No, let it stay buried." For the first time, the lake was left alone. Emma took a job teaching environmental ethics at a nearby college. She rarely spoke about her time at Crescent Lake, but her students noticed she paused whenever someone mentioned restoration. In those pauses, she'd look out the window, lost in thought. One afternoon, a student asked, "Do you believe places can remember us?" Emma smiled faintly. "No," she said, "but we remember them. That's why they never really disappear." Outside, clouds drifted over the horizon, soft, ordinary, and mercifully quiet. That evening, Emma walked home past the quiet river that fed into Crescent Lake. The sky was streaked pink and gold. She stopped to watch the current move, steady, unhurried. The world hadn't changed. Not really. It never does. But something in her had. For the first time, she didn't need to prove what had happened. Truth didn't live in footage or reports. It lived in the spaces we learned to leave alone. She exhaled, the wind carrying the sound away. Somewhere behind her, water met earth again, perfectly still.